Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about what I call one of those unavoidable issues. In this case, what is very wrong with Britain's education system. Back in my younger teens, I attended St Dunstan's community school in the English West Country. In history I was taught mainly British history, except at the end where I was taught how the Nazis came to power in Germany. In lessons, I was taught history from the Romans and Normans to crime, punishment and protest, the Industrial Revolution and the First World War. At no point was I actually taught about one of the most important things about British history of all, which was all about, in depth, the British Empire. At no point was I taught about this other history. I was not taught about our colonial history. I was not taught about the occupation of India or the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. And to be quite honest, I am rather pissed off about this. Today, the human rights crimes committed by the British Imperial Forces is still not something we have come to terms with as a culture. We try to will it out of existence. We cannot face how shameful it is or kid ourselves that we introduced civilization to the conquered countries without stopping to consider if it was even wanted. Instead, the teaching of British history has been one of damage control and covert propaganda. And yes, this has impacted on the West's skewed view of its own place in the world. This has led to catastrophic blunders worldwide in regards to foreign policy. A prime example is the fall and rise again of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, which is where we come to the current conflict between Israel and Gaza. Without going into too many of the ins and outs, the fact remains that Britain was partly responsible for the creation of Israel via Christian Zionist ideology, yet she's returning to a spiritual homeland which for centuries had been known as Palestine, a name given to the whole of the Levant by the Romans in antiquity, had been living there well into the 1800s, mostly rubbing along well with the native Muslim populace. Then, in the 1920s, the Levant fell to the British Imperial Army. The old name was kept, but it was now easier for Jews to set up home there. World War II and the Holocaust changed all that. In 1948, the creation of the State of Israel was established. The Nakba saw swathes of Palestinian land taken by force to the point we are today, where only Gaza and the West Bank remain in Palestinian hands. Following the atrocity of October the 7th, much sensationalised by the Israeli media, apologists for Zionism point to old documents. These reveal that two Semitic-speaking tribes, the Israelites and the Judeans, inhabited the Levant at the time of prehistory, the early Iron Age at the time, and were united, albeit barely, by a single dysfunctional kingdom. In 930 BC, however, North and South split into two separate kingdoms. The period of union was brief, lasting apparently 3 generations, perhaps even less. Most evidence points to the Levant for most of its prehistory being a place of 2 tribal kingdoms and never truly a nation called Israel as it is today. Its first official nation, title Palestina, was given by the Romans following their conquest of the region in 6 CE, but had been known by various forms of the name Palestine by neighbouring nations since the 12th century BC, suggesting the land had been known by that name internationally, at least, well into the mid-Bronze Age. Economic issues mentioned even in the Bible had effectively driven Semitic-speaking peoples of the Judean religion into Greece in the early Iron Age, where they could finally prosper. The idea of various expulsions seemed to be largely an invention of romantic biblical storytelling. When in the 600s AD Palestine fell under the Rashidun Caliphate, no expulsion really took place. Areas abandoned in the economic exodus were simply settled by a mix of incoming Arabs mingled with native Palestinians, which included descendants of Canaanites, Samaritans, and remaining Jewish tribes. Now we are seeing a clear act of ethnic cleansing of the indigenous Palestinian peoples. Whenever I see the Israeli PM insisting they only wish to wipe out Hamas operatives, the actions of the IDF reveal this to be code for wipe out all Palestinians. What happens in the imminent future remains to be seen. Will Netanyahu be brought to justice at The Hague for his own war crimes? Will, as is quite likely, charges be dropped by a jittery jury afraid of American retribution? Whatever happens with Israel citizens rising up in rebellion against a long, unpopular PM, history will not side with Israel. Even if it were the case that the Palestinians were not in fact truly the indigenous people there, the fact is that decades-long oppressed or persecuted peoples of a region have always by default been registered as indigenous. So that would make no difference. And so we must brace ourselves for further disdain to be heaped on empire, unless we in the UK confront our own guilt in the things done in the past in our name. Thank you.